There is a scene early in Built to Sell where a marketing agency owner named Alex Stapleton tells his advisor he is finally ready to be done. The agency does logos, brochures, websites, public relations, search campaigns. It does, by his own account, almost everything. It is profitable. He is exhausted. He thinks he has built something worth selling. His advisor, an older broker named Ted Gordon, listens, and then says a sentence that does most of the work of the entire book. The business is profitable, Ted tells him, but it is not sellable. Nobody wants to buy what you have built. They want to buy you, and you are not for sale. That moment, repeated in some form in tens of thousands of owner-operator businesses every year, is what Built to Sell is actually about. And most readers walk away having misunderstood what it is teaching. This is the Founder's Bookshelf. One book a week, one sharp take, no fluff. If that sounds like your kind of channel, the subscribe button is your friend. Built to Sell was published in 2010, written by John Warrillow, a Canadian entrepreneur who had spent most of his career around a very particular vantage point. He had founded Warrillow & Company, a research firm that helped Fortune 500 brands sell to small business owners. He sold that firm in 2008, just as the financial crisis was reshaping the appetite for closely held businesses. From that vantage, he had spent 2 decades watching what made companies sellable, and more often what made them unsellable. The book arrived at a peculiar moment. The lean startup was a year away. Tim Ferriss had already convinced a generation of operators that the 4-hour workweek was the goal. Patrick Lencioni had made the business fable a respectable form. Warrillow chose the fable deliberately, and the result is a slim book that reads in a single afternoon and pretends, on its surface, to be about how to sell a service business. It is not really about that. The macro context matters. The first wave of baby boomer business owners had just started looking at retirement, and many were discovering that the businesses they had spent 30 years building were structurally unsellable. The numbers are sobering. By some estimates, more than 4 million businesses owned by boomers will need to transition over the next decade, and the majority of them are operator-dependent in the way Alex Stapleton's agency is operator-dependent. Most will not sell, they will close. Warrillow wrote into that wave, but he wrote about something deeper than the mechanics of a sale. What the book is actually doing is mapping the difference between a business and a job. The owner-operator service firm, the one where the founder is the rainmaker and the production manager and the strategist and the closer, is not a business in the structural sense. It is a high-paying job with overhead. It cannot be sold because there is nothing to transfer except the founder, and the founder is not for sale. Warrillow's argument, read carefully, is not that you should turn your business into something a buyer would want. It is that the act of turning your business into something a buyer would want is identical to the act of turning your business into something you can actually own, rather than something that owns you. Which leads to the thesis of this video. The point of building to sell is not to sell. The point is to make ownership optional. Most readers of Built to Sell remember 3 words: teachable, valuable, repeatable. This is Ted's prescription for what Alex should sell, once Alex agrees to stop selling everything. A service offering, Ted argues, should be teachable, meaning the work can be transferred to junior staff with training. It should be valuable, meaning clients are willing to pay a real margin for it. And it should be repeatable, meaning clients come back, or there are enough new clients of the same type that the work compounds rather than starting from zero every quarter. Alex runs through every service his agency offers against those 3 criteria, and almost nothing passes. Public relations is too custom. Web design is too dependent on senior judgment. Search marketing changes too fast to teach. The one offering that passes all 3 tests is logo design, which Alex has been treating as a low-margin loss leader. Ted convinces him to do the opposite. Burn the rest of the agency to the ground. Focus exclusively on a productized brand identity offering. Charge for it up front, paid in full at the start of the engagement. Build a documented 5-step process. Hire 2 salespeople, never 1. Never give clients an option that breaks the system. This is the part of the book everyone remembers because it is the part that reads like a how-to manual. Productize the service, specialize, charge up front, refuse to deviate, make the work teachable, valuable, repeatable. And it is good advice. Honestly applied, this framework alone is worth the book's cover price several times over for any service business owner. But notice what the framework is actually doing under the surface. It is not, in the first instance, about scalability. It is about depersonalization. Every move Ted prescribes is a move that pulls value out of Alex's head and locates it somewhere else, in a documented process, in a sales team that does not depend on Alex's relationships, in a productized offering that does not require Alex's judgment to deliver. The framework is teaching Alex to make himself less necessary, which is the part Warlow does not quite say out loud. The hardest move is not the operational one, it is the psychological one. The founder of a service business has typically built an identity around being indispensable, being the one who can save the client meeting, being the one whose taste makes the work special, being the irreplaceable expert. Teachable, valuable, repeatable is, underneath the slogan, an argument that the founder must be willing to no longer be the expert, to become instead the architect of a system in which other people are the experts, and the system itself is the moat. A lot of founders read the framework, agree with the framework, and then quietly fail to execute on the framework. Not because they cannot productize their service, but because they cannot quite bring themselves to be replaceable. This is the part of Built to Sell most summaries skip. The framework is doing identity surgery while pretending to be doing operations. There is a section in the second half of the book that most summaries mention in a single sentence and move on from. It is the section where Alex turns down work from his largest client. Stapleton Agency, in the book's setup, has a single dominant customer. When Alex starts pursuing his new productized brand identity model, that client wants more of the old work, the custom work, the exhausting, all-hands, last-minute work that does not fit the system Alex is trying to build. Ted's advice, against every instinct Alex has, is to turn it down. Not strategically reduce, turn it down. Say no, completely, to the largest customer in the book. Most readers absorb this as a stylized lesson about avoiding customer concentration. The reading is correct as far as it goes. Customer concentration is a real risk. Every acquirer worth their fee runs a concentration analysis in the first week of diligence. The standard threshold most private equity buyers use is that no single customer should exceed roughly 15 to 20% of revenue. Above that level, multiples start to compress. Above 30%, deals frequently die in committee. So yes, customer concentration matters for the valuation. But the lesson in this chapter is not about valuation. The lesson is about ownership. When one customer accounts for 40% of your revenue, that customer has, in effect, purchased your strategic decisions. They have not paid for them on the invoice. They have acquired them through dependency. You cannot say no to their unreasonable timeline because losing them is existential. You cannot refuse the work that does not fit your model because their next quarter is your next quarter. You think you own the business. The business is co-owned by the whale client, and they have the deciding vote. This is the structural insight Warlow embeds in a chapter that reads, on the surface, like a lesson about diversification. The whale client is not just a risk on the income statement. The whale client is a buyer who never closed the transaction. They are paying installments, and the installments are the strategic decisions you cannot make because you cannot afford to lose the next check. Read this way, the chapter where Alex fires his largest client is the most important scene in the book. It is the moment the business becomes a business. Up until that point, Stapleton Agency was a wholly owned subsidiary of its largest client, dressed up in its own incorporation papers. The instant Alex says no, the business becomes an entity whose strategic decisions belong to its owner. Almost every founder this video reaches has, somewhere in their portfolio, a version of the whale client. The customer who is too big to challenge. The contract that is too important to renegotiate. The relationship that is, in some quiet way, deciding what the business does next quarter. The lesson Warlow leaves implicit, and that this section makes explicit, is that customer concentration is not a risk metric. It is an ownership metric. The percentage of revenue from your top client is also, roughly, the percentage of your strategic decisions you have surrendered. The hardest hour in any founder's life is the hour they decline work from the client who built the business. It is also, structurally, the hour the business is born. Built to Sell was published 16 years ago. The core argument has held up better than most business books from its era, but the world it imagines is not quite the world a founder in 2026 is operating in, and an honest reading needs to mark the places where the prescriptions need updating. 3 updates in particular are worth taking seriously. The first is that the productized service model has been democratized. In 2010, the move from a custom agency to a productized offering was a meaningful structural advantage. By 2026, productization is the table stakes of any credible service business. A casual scroll through any agency directory shows productized packaging everywhere. The competitive edge Warlow's framework conferred has eroded, not because the framework is wrong, but because everyone has adopted it. The moat needs to come from somewhere else now. Often it comes from distribution, from category positioning, or from a proprietary data asset that the productized service generates. The productization itself is necessary but no longer sufficient. The second is that artificial intelligence has shortened the half-life of documented process. One of TED's core moves is the construction of a proprietary 5-step methodology, written down, trademarked, defended. In 2010, that documented process was a durable moat. A competitor could copy the principle, but copying the actual operational system took years. In 2026, a competent operator with access to a large language model can reverse engineer most documented service processes in weeks. The moat from process documentation is thinner than it was. What replaces it is harder to articulate, but it tends to involve proprietary inputs, network effects, or accumulated client data that a competitor cannot synthesize from outside. The third update is broader. Warlow's later work, particularly The Automatic Customer, extended Built to Sell's argument into the era of recurring revenue. That extension is essential. Built to Sell hints at the value of subscription models, but does not fully grapple with them. A reader of Built to Sell in 2026 should understand that the upfront payment, productized service model TED prescribes is one of several routes to a sellable business, and probably not the highest multiple one. The highest multiples in the current market are paid for recurring revenue, particularly recurring revenue with strong net retention. None of this invalidates Built to Sell. The structural insight remains correct. The founder who depersonalizes the business creates something that can be owned rather than merely operated. The prescriptions need updating. The principle does not. What Warlow could not quite see in 2010 is that the market would do what markets do. It would absorb his prescriptions, commoditize them, and move on. The next moat, whatever it is being built right now, and the founders who will sell at the highest multiples in 2030 are not the ones running the playbook TED gave Alex. They are the ones who have absorbed the principle underneath the playbook and applied it to a different layer of the stack. Which brings us back to the thesis. The point of building to sell is not to sell. The point is to make ownership optional. Read most carefully. Built to Sell is not a book about exit planning. It is a book about the daily experience of ownership. Every prescription TED gives Alex, taken together, produces a business that is structurally separable from the founder. That separation is the precondition for sale. It is also the precondition for almost everything else worth having as an owner. A business that does not require you to be in the office can be sold. It can also be left alone for a month while you take your kids somewhere. A business that has documented its process can be transferred to a buyer. It can also be operated by a competent general manager while you spend a year writing the book you keep saying you will write. A business that has diversified away from the whale client can survive the loss of that client. It can also pursue a new market segment that the whale client would have vetoed. The features of a sellable business and the features of a livable business are the same features. This is the part of Warlow that most summaries cannot reach, because most summaries are reading the book as a manual rather than an argument. As a manual, Built to Sell is a fine guide to specific moves a service business owner should make in pursuit of an eventual transaction. As an argument, it is something larger. It is a claim about what ownership actually means, and a quiet indictment of the version of ownership most operator founders have settled for. Most founders of service businesses do not own a business. They own a job with overhead that pays better than the equivalent salary and feels like freedom because they are not on someone else's calendar. The job is structured so that they cannot be fired, but it is still a job in every operationally meaningful sense. They must show up. They must perform the work. Their absence breaks the system. The conversion built to sell is really describing is the conversion from job to business, from practitioner to owner, from the irreplaceable expert to the architect of a system that does not require the architect to be on site. The transactional outcome, the actual sale of the company, is downstream of this conversion. It is also, in many cases, optional after the conversion has happened. There is a quiet pattern in the world of operator-owned businesses where the founders who do the work of building to sell often choose, in the end, not to sell. They keep the business because by the time it is sellable, it is also enjoyable to own. The cash flows are clean, the systems run, the team is competent. The owner has, for the first time, a real relationship with the asset, rather than being one of its operational components. The cruelest reading of Built to Sell is that the people who need it most will read it as an exit playbook, execute none of it, and stay trapped in the business they thought they owned. The most useful reading is that the playbook is also the path to actually owning what you have built. Sellable is not the goal. Sellable is the proof. The goal is optionality. 4 moves, then, for an operator who has taken the argument seriously. The first is the vacation test. Not a thought experiment, an actual scheduled 2-week absence with no phone access to the business. The list of things that would break in your absence is the list of dependencies you have on yourself. That list is the to-do list for the next 12 months. Most founders cannot pass this test on the first attempt. The test is not the point. The list is the point. The second is the concentration audit. Pull your revenue by customer for the trailing 12 months. Calculate the percentage from your single largest account. If it exceeds roughly 15%, you have a structural problem that is shaping your strategic decisions whether you have admitted it or not. Build a quarterly plan to dilute concentration, not by firing the client, but by building enough capacity in the rest of the book that the loss of any single account would not be existential. This is one of the hardest disciplines in service business ownership, because the path of least resistance is always to take more work from the client who is already saying yes. The third is the documentation cadence. Pick one process per quarter and document it to the level that it could be operated by someone who started last month. Not a sketch. An operational document a competent stranger could execute from. 4 processes a year for 3 years gives you 12 documented systems, which in most service businesses is the difference between an asset and a job. The fourth, and this is the one that matters, is the identity move. Stop asking what you want the business to do next, and start asking what the business needs next. The pronoun matters. The first version makes the business an extension of your preferences. The second version makes the business an entity in its own right, with needs that can be served independently of your enthusiasm on any given Tuesday. This shift sounds rhetorical and is in fact operational. It is the shift from practitioner to owner, and it shows up in every meaningful decision you make. Do those 4 things, and you are doing what Warlow's book is actually asking you to do. The exit, should you choose it, takes care of itself. If this is the kind of analysis you want more of, the subscribe button helps the channel more than the algorithm cares to admit. Next week, we open a book that promised founders a menu of 19 ways to grow, and then watched most of that menu get rewritten by the internet. Gabriel Weinberg and Justin Mayers, Traction. We will work through which of the 19 channels still function in 2026, which have quietly died, and which have mutated into something the book did not quite anticipate. The bookshelf is open. See you Tuesday.